Hi Year 11. This video is mainly focusing on joints. Now, we've talked about bones, we've talked about cartilage, we've talked about the skeleton generally, but in terms of joints, a joint is a place where you're going to have two bones meeting. Different types of joint allow different types and amounts of movement. So that's going to really determine the planes or the direction of the rotation that you're going to get there. It's also critical for you to be aware of as well the role of ligaments in this. Bones are held together in the joint by a ligament. Ligaments link bones. So when we talk about joints, it's important to recognize there are different types of joint. You're going to have a fibrous joint, and that's going to be fixed. It's not going to allow any movement between the bones. So a good example of that are the bones in your skull. There's also going to be some slightly movable joints. They're held together by cartilage, and they will allow a small amount of movement because cartilage is flexible. So good examples of those are the joints between your vertebrae and your backbone, or the parts of the joints between those ribs or the sternum. So those being an example of costal cartilage. When we talk about other types of joints, though, synovial joints are a major focus for you to be aware of. Now, synovial joints are held together by ligaments and they move freely. There are different types of synovial joints. So one of the first types is your ball and socket joint. And a good example of that is your hip joint and your shoulder. A ball shape at the end of one bone is going to fit into the socket shape in the saucer of the other. And these joints are very, very mobile. They can move in three planes. And from the shoulder joint, that means that the arm can move up and down, it can move away, it can move towards, and it can rotate, which means you can make yourself pretend to be a helicopter with your arm. Get to think. Then you've got yourself hinge joints. Hinge joints are found at the elbow and in the knee and in the finger, and the difference between a hinge joint and a ball and socket joint critically in the range of movement. A hinge joint is only going to allow movement in one plane, like the hinge on a door. You can't be rotating your door. If you do, you've got interesting doors. Knees, fingers, elbows, hinge joints, they can flex and they can extend. They can move up and they can move down. Okay, there are some other examples of hinge joints where the bones can glide past or they can pivot, but for the purposes of the life processes internal, hinge joints, ball and socket joints, that's where it is. Now, when we talk about the generalized structure of a synovial joint, it's important to recognize at the outset that friction is not the friend of something that's going to be moving past something else. If you remember your year 9 and year 10 definitions from physics, friction is defined as the force that opposes movement. So when we have friction occurring, when we have two surfaces moving past each other, we want to reduce friction because friction is not your friend. So you've got this layer of smooth articular cartilage covering the ends of bones when they meet. So you'll also have a joint capsule, and that joint capsule is going to be made from ligaments and it's going to form a sleeve all the way around the joint. That joint capsule is going to be lined with a synovial membrane, and that's going to produce something called synovial fluid. And the purpose of synovial fluid is to lubricate and nourish the joint. It keeps it moving smoothly and freely, like you put oil in a car or on a hinge joint, or you put WD-40 on something. This is basically your lubricant, just to keep that joint or to keep that hinge or that ball and socket moving freely. You're also going to have ligaments, and they're going to link the bone while the muscles are going to be tied to the bone, and that will happen through tendons tying the muscle to the bone. Again, be mindful here, ligaments are linking bone to bone. Muscles are tied to bone by tendons.